The dust-caked stagecoach rattled into Las Lunas, New Mexico territory, on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, carrying a woman who had already failed at everything that mattered and feared she was about to fail again. Zelda Ainsworth pressed her gloved hand against the coach window, studying the scattered adobe buildings and wooden storefronts through a film of desert grit. 23 years old and already a widow, already penniless, already desperate enough to answer an advertisement from a man she had never met. The letter, crumpled in her reticule, promised a respectable marriage to a prosperous rancher named Howard Jenkins, but Zelda had learned long ago that promises were as fragile as spun sugar. Her first marriage had taught her that lesson. Gerald had promised her a comfortable life in Boston before gambling away her modest inheritance and drinking himself into an early grave. The creditors had taken everything, even her mother's pearl earrings. Coming west as a mail-order bride was not romance but survival, and Zelda approached it with the grim determination of someone who knew she was running out of chances. The coach lurched to a stop outside a building marked with a faded sign reading, Wells Fargo. Zelda's traveling companion, a cattle buyer from Kansas City, tipped his hat and helped her down. The heat struck her like a physical blow, so different from the humid summers back east. She stood beside her worn carpet bag, scanning the dusty street for a man she would recognize only from his description. Tall, gray-haired, prosperous-looking. Instead, her eyes found a cowboy leaning against the hitching post across the street. He was younger than she expected anyone in this rough territory to notice her, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and shoulders that strained against a faded blue shirt. What caught her attention was not his appearance but the way he was watching her, with an expression she could not quite read. Concern, perhaps, or curiosity. She looked away quickly, smoothing her travel-wrinkled dress. The fabric was gray wool, too heavy for this climate, but it was the most respectable thing she owned. Everything about her arrival needed to be perfect. She could not afford another failure. "Miss Ainsworth." The voice came from her left, and Zelda turned to see an older man approaching. He was tall, as promised, and gray-haired, but prosperity had apparently fled recently. His suit was shabby, and his eyes held a desperate quality that made her stomach clench with recognition. She knew that look. She had seen it in her own mirror. Mr. Jenkins. She extended her hand, and he took it with fingers that trembled slightly. "I am pleased you came," he said, but there was no pleasure in his voice, only a kind of grim relief. "The wagon is this way." Zelda followed him, her heart sinking with each step. The wagon was as shabby as his suit, the horse too thin. This was not the prosperous ranch she had imagined, not the secure future she desperately needed. But what choice did she have? Return to Boston and debtor's prison. Take in sewing at starvation wages. At least as a wife she would have a roof over her head. They were nearly to the wagon when a commotion erupted from the saloon. Men spilled into the street, shouting, and one of them crashed into Mr. Jenkins hard enough to send him sprawling. Zelda gasped and reached for him, but he was already scrambling up, his face flushed with humiliation and anger. "Watch where you are going, you drunk fool," Jenkins shouted, but the man who had struck him was already lurching away, oblivious. Zelda helped brush dust from his jacket, her hands moving automatically even as her mind raced. Everything about this felt wrong. The shabby clothes, the trembling hands, the flash of impotent rage. She had married one weak man already. Was she really about to shackle herself to another? "Perhaps we should get you somewhere to sit down," she said carefully. "The hotel, perhaps. We could talk." Jenkins' jaw tightened. "Talk? What is there to talk about? You came here to marry me, did you not? Well, let us get it done then. The preacher is expecting us." "Now." Zelda felt panic rising in her chest. But we have only just met. Surely we should take a few days to become acquainted. I paid for your passage, Jenkins said, his voice hardening. You agreed to come here and marry me. I need a wife, Miss Ainsworth. I need one today. The bank is threatening to take my land, and they have made it clear that only a marriage settlement will satisfy them. Your letter said you had $500. The world tilted sideways. Zelda gripped her carpet bag, the blood draining from her face. I wrote no such thing. I told you plainly that I came to you penniless. Perhaps you confused my letter with someone else's. But even as she said it, she knew it was not confusion. It was in his eyes, the same desperation and dishonesty that had marked her first husband. Jenkins had simply read what he wanted to read, or invented it whole cloth. And now he expected her to solve his problems, just as Gerald had expected her inheritance to solve his. Miss Ainsworth, do not play games with me, Jenkins said, gripping her arm. His fingers dug in hard enough to hurt. You will marry me this afternoon, or I will see you charged with fraud. You came here under false pretenses, took advantage of my generosity. Let her go. The voice was quiet but carried clear authority. Zelda turned to see the young cowboy from across the street now standing just a few feet away. Up close, she could see his eyes were a startling gray, like storm clouds over the desert. He was not looking at her but at Jenkins, and his expression was calm in a way that suggested real danger. This is none of your concern, Reeves, Jenkins said, but his voice wavered and his grip on Zelda's arm loosened. You are hurting a lady in the middle of town, Howard. That makes it everybody's concern. The cowboy, Reeves, shifted his weight slightly, and Zelda noticed for the first time the well-worn Colt revolver on his hip. Why don't you let her go, and we all take a breath? Jenkins released her arm and stepped back, his face mottled with anger and embarrassment. She is my intended bride, contracted and paid for. If she refuses to honor that contract, did you pay for her passage? Reeves asked, his eyes still on Jenkins. Well, the agency paid, Reeves said flatly. Which means you have no contract, no claim, and no right to put your hands on her. He finally looked at Zelda, and his expression softened. Madam, did you want to marry this man today? The question was simple, but it felt like someone had handed her a key. Want. When had anyone last asked her what she wanted? Zelda straightened her shoulders, feeling something like courage flicker to life in her chest. No, she said clearly. I do not believe I do. Jenkins sputtered, his face going red. You cannot just change your mind. You came here to marry me. I came here to meet you, Zelda corrected, her voice growing stronger. To see if we might suit. We do not. I am sorry for the misunderstanding, Mr. Jenkins, but I will not be marrying you today or any other day. For a moment, she thought Jenkins might lunge at her. His hands clenched into fists and his breath came in sharp gasps. But Reeves shifted again, not threateningly but unmistakably present, and Jenkins seemed to collapse in on himself. You will regret this, he said bitterly. Both of you. Reeves, your brother, will hear about this interference. I reckon he will, Reeves agreed, unbothered. Why don't you head on home, Howard? Sleep off whatever you have been drinking. Jenkins glared at them both before turning on his heel and stalking toward his wagon. They watched in silence as he climbed up and drove away, the thin horse plodding down the dusty street. When he was out of sight, Zelda discovered her knees had gone weak. She swayed, and suddenly Reeves' hand was on her elbow, gentle but steady. Let us get you inside, he said. Out of this heat. He guided her toward a building with a sign reading Martinez Cafe and Boarding House. The interior was blessedly cool and dim. A woman with dark hair graying at the temples looked up from behind the counter, her face creasing with concern when she saw Zelda's pallor. Ruth, can we get some water? Reeves asked, helping Zelda into a chair. "And maybe some of that lemonade if you have it." "Of course, Riley." The woman, Ruth, bustled away and returned moments later with a glass of lemonade beaded with condensation. Zelda accepted it gratefully, the tart sweetness helping to settle her stomach. Riley Reeves, she thought. That was his name. Riley Xavier Reeves, she would learn later, though everyone called him Riley. He sat down across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to help if she needed it. "Thank you," Zelda said when she could trust her voice. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not intervened." Riley shrugged. "Howard Jenkins is a desperate man, and desperate men do foolish things. But he is not usually violent. I do not think he would have truly hurt you, but I am glad we did not have to find out. You know him well." "Well enough. His ranch borders my brother's land. He has been in financial trouble for years, bad decisions and worse luck." Riley leaned back in his chair, studying her with those gray eyes. "I heard he had sent for a mail-order bride, but I did not realize it was happening today." Zelda looked down at her lemonade, shame heating her cheeks. "I suppose that makes me rather pathetic. A woman so desperate she would travel halfway across the country to marry a stranger." "That makes you brave," Riley said firmly. "Takes courage to leave everything you know and start over." "Nothing pathetic about that." She looked up, startled by the certainty in his voice. No one had called her brave in a very long time. Failed, foolish, unfortunate, yes, but not brave. "I am not sure what I will do now," she admitted. "I used the last of my money for the stagecoach from Santa Fe. I have enough for perhaps 2 nights' lodging and then—" She trailed off, the reality of her situation settling over her like a suffocating blanket. Ruth Martinez had been wiping down the counter, but she spoke up now. "You are welcome to stay here as long as you need, dear. We can work out payment later." "I could not possibly," Zelda began. "You can and you will," Ruth said firmly. "Las Lunas is not much, but we take care of our own. You stood up to Howard Jenkins today. That makes you worthy of respect in my book." Riley was nodding. "And there is work to be had if you are willing. My sister-in-law has been looking for help with their children and the house. Not charity," he added quickly, seeing Zelda's expression. "Honest work for honest pay. Rachel, that is my brother's wife, is expecting their 4th child and having a difficult time of it. She needs someone capable and sensible." Hope flickered again, fragile but real. "I kept house for my father before he passed, and I helped run a boarding house in Boston for a time. I am not afraid of hard work." "Then let me take you out to meet them tomorrow," Riley offered. "It is a good family and the ranch is prosperous. You would be treated well." Zelda studied him, trying to understand this stranger who had appeared at exactly the right moment like something from a fairy tale. He had no reason to help her, no obligation to care whether Howard Jenkins treated her roughly or whether she ended up destitute on the streets. Yet here he sat, arranging her future as if her welfare actually mattered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Riley seemed to consider the question. "My mother came west as a mail-order bride," he said finally. "Married my father sight unseen, and traveled from Missouri to New Mexico territory with nothing but a trunk of clothes and more courage than sense. He was a good man, my father, and they had a long, happy marriage. But I have always known it could have gone differently. She could have arrived to find someone like Howard Jenkins, someone who saw her as property or a solution to his problems rather than a person." He met Zelda's eyes. "I suppose I am doing this because someone should have been there to help my mother if she had needed it. Seems only right to help you, seeing as you are in similar circumstances." The simple decency of it made Zelda's throat tight. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. That night, installed in a small but clean room at Ruth's boarding house, Zelda lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the New Mexico night. Somewhere, a coyote howled. The wind whispered through the cottonwood trees along the river. Her whole body ached with exhaustion, but her mind would not stop racing. She had failed again. Failed to make a successful marriage, failed to secure her future, failed to find the safety she so desperately needed. But for the first time in years, failure did not feel like an ending. It felt like a door opening onto something unknown but not entirely terrible. And there was Riley Reeves, with his quiet strength and storm-cloud eyes, offering help without expectation of repayment. Zelda was not foolish enough to read romance into his kindness. He had helped her because it was the right thing to do, nothing more. But the memory of his hand on her elbow, steady and certain, followed her down into sleep. Morning came bright and hot. Zelda washed and dressed in her second-best dress, navy cotton that was more suitable for the climate. Ruth provided a breakfast of eggs and fresh bread, refusing payment, and by the time Riley arrived with a wagon, Zelda felt almost human again. The ride to the Reeves ranch took the better part of an hour. Riley kept up an easy stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area. Las Lunas had been settled by Spanish families long before Anglo settlers arrived, he explained, and the mix of cultures gave the town its character. My brother married into one of those old Spanish families, Riley said. Rachel Martinez, Ruth's niece, caused quite a stir at the time 15 years back, but they have been happy together. Built up the ranch from nothing into one of the most successful operations in the territory. And you work for them? Zelda asked. With them, Riley corrected. It is a family operation. My brother Randall handles the business side, I manage the cattle and the horses, and we have a crew of good men who have been with us for years. He paused. I have my own small place a few miles from the main house. Nothing fancy, but it is mine. There was pride in his voice, and Zelda understood it. She had lost everything that might have been hers, but Riley had built something from his own labor and effort. That meant something. The ranch, when it came into view, was impressive. A large adobe house sat surrounded by cottonwood trees, with corrals and outbuildings spreading in all directions. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and horses grazed in a nearby pasture. It looked prosperous and well-maintained, exactly the kind of place Zelda had hoped Howard Jenkins would provide. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, one hand pressed to her lower back. She was beautiful despite her obvious pregnancy discomfort, with dark hair pulled into a practical bun and warm brown eyes. 3 children tumbled out after her, ranging in age from about 10 down to perhaps 4. Riley, you did not tell me you were bringing company, Rachel called, but there was welcome in her voice, not censure. Riley helped Zelda down from the wagon. Rachel, this is Miss Zelda Ainsworth. Zelda, my sister-in-law, Rachel Reeves, and these scoundrels are Marcus, Isabel, and Thomas. The children studied Zelda with frank curiosity while Rachel's eyes sharpened with interest. Ainsworth, you would be the young woman Howard Jenkins was expecting. Would have been, Zelda corrected quietly. I declined the match. Good for you, Rachel said bluntly. Howard is not a bad man, but he is a weak one, and weakness can be more dangerous than wickedness. Come inside out of this sun. Riley, make yourself useful and take the children to check on the new foal. The children cheered and dragged their uncle toward the barn, leaving Zelda to follow Rachel into the house. The interior was cool and spacious, furnished simply but comfortably. Rachel gestured her toward a chair and lowered herself into another with visible relief. Forgive me for not standing on ceremony, Rachel said. This pregnancy has been difficult, and these days I am grateful just to sit down without feeling like I am carrying a sack of flour. Please, "Do not apologize," Zelda said. "I am grateful for your hospitality. Riley mentioned you might have need of help with the household and children." Rachel studied her with the same directness her uncle-in-law had shown. "I will not lie to you, Miss Ainsworth. I do need help desperately, but I will not hire someone simply because they are desperate themselves. I need to know you can handle 3 energetic children, a house this size, and a ranch that regularly hosts cowboys, buyers, and travelers. I need someone capable and calm in a crisis." It was a fair question, and Zelda appreciated the honesty. She straightened in her chair. "I kept house for my father from the time my mother died when I was 16. After his death, I worked for a year at a boarding house in Boston, managing all the cooking and cleaning for 20 residents. I am capable, Mrs. Reeves, and I am desperate enough that you can be sure I will work harder than anyone you could hire who was not." A smile tugged at Rachel's mouth. "Call me Rachel, and I appreciate your honesty." She shifted in her chair, wincing slightly. "I can offer room and board plus $30 a month. The work will be demanding, especially once the baby comes, but I am fair and my husband is generous. We treat our people well." $30 a month was more than Zelda had dared hope for. It would allow her to save, to build towards some kind of independent future. "When would you need me to start?" "Yesterday," Rachel said wryly. "But I suppose tomorrow morning will do. Riley can fetch your things from town." They spent the next hour discussing details. Zelda would have her own room in the house, sharing meals with the family. Her duties would include helping with the children, cooking, cleaning, and general household management. Rachel made it clear that she expected competence but not servitude. "I do not need you to call me madam or curtsy," Rachel said. "I need you to be another capable adult in this house, someone I can rely on. I have a feeling we will get along well, Zelda." Riley returned with the children, who were full of stories about the new foal. Over lunch, Zelda met Riley Reeves, Riley's older brother. Where Riley was lean and quiet, Randall was broader and more outgoing, with the same gray eyes and an easy laugh. He welcomed Zelda warmly and seemed pleased by Rachel's decision to hire her. That afternoon, Riley drove Zelda back to town to collect her few possessions. On the way, he was quieter than he had been that morning, and Zelda found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. "You and your brother seem very different," she ventured. Riley smiled slightly. "Randall takes after our father. Big personality, natural leader. I am more like our mother, quieter, but we have always worked well together, known what the other was thinking without having to say it." "That must be nice," Zelda said. "I was an only child. I used to wish for siblings." "It has its moments," Riley agreed. "Though there were times growing up when I would have happily sold Randall to passing traders." He paused. "What about your husband? Did he have family?" Zelda had known the question would come eventually, but she still tensed. "No. Gerald was alone in the world, which is perhaps why we married so quickly. We were both lonely." She looked down at her hands. "It was not a good marriage, Mr. Reeves. He had demons I could not fight, and in the end they consumed him. I try not to think of myself as a widow because that implies a loss, and what I felt when he died was mostly relief." She had never said that out loud before, and she held her breath, waiting for judgment. "That must have been lonely in a different way," Riley said quietly. "Being married but still alone." The understanding in his voice made her eyes sting. "Yes," she whispered. "Exactly that." They drove in companionable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking steadily. Then Riley said, "My mother always told me that failing at something that was doomed from the start is not real failure. It is just learning what not to do next time." Zelda looked at him. "I have failed at so many things. I should be very wise by now." "Maybe you are," Riley said. "You were wise enough to walk away from Howard Jenkins. That took more courage than going through with a bad marriage would have." "I was terrified," Zelda admitted. "I still am. What if this does not work out? What if Rachel decides I am not suitable? What if you fall?" Riley interrupted gently. "That is what you are really afraid of, is it not? That you will fail again, and this time there will be no one to catch you." The accuracy of it stole her breath. That was exactly her fear, the cold terror that had followed her since Gerald's death. She was so tired of falling, of failing, of discovering that the ground beneath her feet was not solid at all. Riley pulled the wagon to a stop, right there in the middle of the dusty road. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I cannot promise you will not fail, Zelda. Nobody can promise that. Life is uncertain, especially out here. But I can promise that if you fall, I will catch you. And if I cannot catch you, I will help you back up. You are not alone anymore." It was too much, this kindness from a man she barely knew. Zelda felt tears spilling over, and she could not stop them. She covered her face with her hands, embarrassed by her weakness but unable to contain it. She felt the wagon shift as Riley moved closer, and then his hand was on her shoulder, warm and steady. He did not speak, did not try to hush her tears or tell her everything would be fine. He simply sat with her while she cried out months of fear and loneliness and desperate hope. When she finally composed herself, using her handkerchief to dry her face, she found Riley still sitting close, patient and calm. "I apologize," she said. "That was unseemly." "That was human," Riley corrected. "You have been through a lot, Zelda. You are allowed to feel it." She met his eyes and saw something there that made her heart skip. Not pity exactly, but a kind of fierce protectiveness, as if her welfare had become personally important to him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness." "You can repay it by building a good life here," Riley said. "By letting yourself be happy. That would be payment enough." They continued to town, and Zelda collected her carpet bag from Ruth's boarding house. Ruth hugged her goodbye and made her promise to visit. Then Riley drove her back to the ranch as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Zelda settled into life at the Reeves ranch with surprising ease. The children, initially wary, warmed to her quickly. Marcus, the oldest, was serious and thoughtful, fascinated by the cattle operation and eager to learn everything from his father and uncle. Isabel was bright and curious, full of questions about everything. Thomas, at 4, was all energy and mischief, constantly finding new ways to get into trouble. Rachel proved to be exactly what she had promised: fair, kind, and grateful for help. She and Zelda developed an easy rhythm, dividing household tasks according to their strengths. Rachel was an excellent cook, so she handled most of the meal planning, while Zelda took over the cleaning, laundry, and managing the children's schedules. The household was busy, with cowboys coming and going, occasional visitors staying for meals or overnight, and the constant work of maintaining a working ranch. Zelda found she enjoyed the bustle after the lonely months in Boston. There was always something to do, always someone who needed her, and for the first time in years she felt useful. Riley came by the main house most evenings for dinner. It was a family tradition, Rachel explained. Even though Riley had his own place, the brothers liked to spend time together, and Riley doted on his niece and nephews. Zelda found herself looking forward to those evenings more than she should. Riley had a dry sense of humor that often caught her off guard, and he was unfailingly kind to everyone, from the youngest cowhand to the oldest ranch worker. She tried not to notice how her heart sped up when he smiled at her across the dinner table. tried not to read too much into it when he asked about her day or offered to help with some heavy task. He was simply a good man, she told herself. His kindness meant nothing romantic. But then there were moments that made her wonder. 2 weeks after she arrived, one of the horses escaped its corral and trampled Rachel's vegetable garden. Zelda had been hanging laundry and saw it happen. Without thinking, she ran toward the horse, waving her apron to shoo it away before it could do more damage. The horse, startled, reared up. Zelda stumbled backward, lost her footing, and would have fallen directly into a pile of fence posts if strong hands had not caught her from behind. "Easy," Riley's voice said in her ear, his arm steadying her. "I've got you." Her heart was pounding from the shock, and she sagged against him for a moment before realizing how improper it was. She straightened quickly, but his hands remained on her waist, making sure she was stable before he let go. "Thank you," she gasped. The garden can be replanted," Riley said firmly. "You could have been seriously hurt, Zelda. Do not ever do that again." There was real fear in his voice, and when she turned to look at him, his face was pale. He had been genuinely frightened for her. "I am sorry," she said. "I was not thinking." "No, you were not." His hands dropped from her waist, but he stayed close. "You are brave, Zelda, but bravery and recklessness are different things. If you had been hurt—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "But I was not," she pointed out, "because you caught me." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition that went beyond words. Riley's expression softened. "I promised I would," he said quietly. That night, lying in bed, Zelda allowed herself to examine the feelings she had been trying to ignore. She was developing affection for Riley Reeves, perhaps more than affection. The way her pulse quickened when he entered a room, the way she found herself watching for him in the evenings, the way his rare smiles felt like gifts meant just for her. It was foolish. She had known him less than a month. And after the disaster with Gerald, she had promised herself she would never again mistake loneliness for love or gratitude for genuine feeling. But this felt different. Riley asked nothing from her. He expected nothing. He simply offered his steady presence and quiet support, day after day, as reliable as the sunrise. She was falling in love with him, Zelda realized, with a mixture of wonder and terror. And she had no idea if he felt anything similar, or if she was simply another lost soul he had decided to help. The summer heat intensified as August gave way to September. Rachel grew more uncomfortable with each passing day, and Zelda took on more of her duties. She managed the household, oversaw the children's lessons, helped prepare meals for the ranch hands, and still found time to sit with Rachel in the evenings, keeping her company while they sewed or shelled peas or simply talked. Rachel was the closest thing to a friend Zelda had known in years. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard, Rachel said, "My Uncle Riley has feelings for you." Zelda's hands stilled on her sewing. "I do not think. I have known Riley since he was 17 years old," Rachel interrupted gently. "I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. And before you say it is just kindness, I should tell you that Riley is kind to everyone, but he does not watch the ranch cook the way he watches you. He does not smile at the shopkeeper's daughter the way he smiles at you." Zelda's heart was hammering. "Even if that were true, I have nothing to offer him, Rachel. I am penniless, a failed wife, and brave and capable and good with children, and exactly the kind of strong woman Riley needs," Rachel said firmly. "Do not let fear of failing keep you from trying, Zelda. That is not living, that is just surviving." "I do not know if I am ready," Zelda whispered. "Then tell him that," Rachel advised. "Riley is patient. He will wait until you are ready, and he will not push. But do not push him away because you are afraid. That is not fair to either of you." The conversation haunted Zelda. She began to watch Riley more carefully, looking for signs of what Rachel had described. And once she knew what to look for, she saw it everywhere. The way his eyes sought her out when he entered a room. The way he always seemed to be nearby when she needed help with something heavy or difficult. The way he remembered small details, like her preference for coffee over tea, or that she was afraid of thunderstorms. One evening in late September, a storm rolled across the desert. Zelda had helped get the children to bed and was tidying the kitchen when the first crack of thunder made her flinch. She hated storms, had since childhood when lightning struck a tree outside her bedroom window. Rachel had already retired for the night, and Randall was in his study working on accounts. Zelda tried to focus on washing dishes, but each rumble of thunder made her hands shake. "You are afraid of storms." She jumped and turned to find Riley standing in the doorway. She had not heard him come in. "I thought you had gone home," she said. "I was going to, but that storm is going to be bad. Thought I would wait it out here." He stepped into the kitchen, his eyes on her face. "You are shaking." "I am fine," Zelda said automatically, but another crack of thunder made her drop the dish she was holding. It shattered on the floor and she stood there staring at the pieces, feeling tears of frustration prick her eyes. "I am sorry. I will clean it up." "Leave it," Riley said. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and took her wet hands in his. "Come on." He led her to the sitting room, settled her on the sofa, and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Then he sat down beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "When I was 8, he said conversationally, "lightning hit our barn. The whole thing burned down and we lost 2 horses and most of that season's hay. I was in the house, safe, but I could hear the animals screaming and I could not do anything to help them. Storms bothered me for years after that." Zelda looked at him. "What helped? Time," he said honestly, "and my mother. She would sit with me during storms, talk to me, distract me. Eventually the fear faded to just discomfort." He met her eyes. "What is your storm about?" She told him about the tree, about being trapped in her room, about her father's absence and her terror. She had never told anyone the full story, but somehow it poured out of her, all the childhood fear and adult shame at still being affected by it. Riley listened without interrupting, his gray eyes steady on her face. When she finished, he said, "Seems to me that fear is not about the storm at all. It is about being alone and helpless while something terrifying happens around you." It was true. Zelda realized it as he said it. The storm itself was not the problem. It was the feeling of being abandoned, of having no one to help her through it. "You are not alone now," Riley said quietly. "I am right here, and I am not going anywhere until this storm passes." They sat together while the storm raged outside, and Riley talked to her about anything and everything. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents, about the time he and Randall decided to race their horses, and both ended up in the river. His stories were funny and warm, and slowly Zelda felt her fear recede, replaced by something gentler. When the storm finally passed and silence settled over the house, Zelda realized she was leaning against Riley's shoulder. She started to pull away, embarrassed, but his arm came around her, holding her gently in place. "Riley," she whispered. "I have feelings for you, Zelda," he said, his voice low and serious. "I have tried to hide them because I did not want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. But I think you should know. You are the bravest, strongest woman I have ever met, and somewhere between watching you stand up to Howard Jenkins and watching you build a life here, I fell in love with you." Zelda's breath caught. She turned to look up at him, searching his face. What she saw there was nothing like Gerald's feverish need or Howard Jenkins' desperation. It was solid and steady like Riley himself. "I am afraid," she admitted. I have failed at this before, Riley. I do not know if I can survive failing at it again. Then we will not fail, he said simply. We will work at it together every day, and if we stumble, we will catch each other. That is what love is, Zelda, not some magic that makes everything perfect, but two people choosing to hold each other up. You make it sound simple. The feeling is simple, Riley said. The work is hard. But I am a rancher. I am not afraid of hard work. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch infinitely gentle. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking if you might feel the same way, if there is a chance you could love me back. Zelda thought about the past 2 months, about how Riley had appeared at exactly the moment she needed him and had continued to appear, day after day, steady and true. About how he made her laugh and made her feel safe and never, ever made her feel small or foolish. About how her heart lifted every time she saw him and how the future seemed less frightening when he was part of it. I do love you, she said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. I think I have for a while now. I was just too afraid to admit it. Riley's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Can I kiss you? She nodded, and he leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, nothing like Gerald's rough, whiskey-soaked kisses. This kiss tasted like promise and hope in coming home. When they pulled apart, both breathing a little unsteadily, Zelda rested her forehead against his. I am still afraid, she whispered. I know, Riley said, but I meant what I said. If you fall, I will catch you. Always. They courted properly after that, with Riley calling on her in the evenings and taking her for walks along the river. Randall and Rachel were delighted, and the children quickly adjusted to the idea of Uncle Riley and Miss Zelda as a pair. The ranch hands treated it as inevitable, as if they had all seen it coming from the start. Riley was a careful suitor, mindful of Zelda's past hurts. He never pushed her, never demanded more than she was ready to give. They talked for hours about everything, learning each other's histories and hopes. Zelda told him about Boston, about her father's bookshop, about the dreams she had once held of seeing the world. Riley told her about his plans for expanding his horse breeding operation, about the small house he was building that he hoped might someday hold a family. I want to show you something, he said one October evening, helping her into his wagon. He drove them to his property, a few miles from the main ranch house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Riley's house sat on a small rise, overlooking a valley where a dozen horses grazed contentedly. The house was not finished yet, but Zelda could see what it would become. 2 stories, solid and well built, with a wide porch and big windows to let in the light. I have been working on it for 3 years, Riley said as they walked through the bare rooms, taking my time doing it right. I always planned to live here eventually, but now. He turned to face her. Now I want to finish it. I want to make it a real home, with you if you are willing. Zelda's heart was so full she could hardly breathe. Are you asking? Not yet, Riley said, though his eyes were warm with promise. When I ask you to marry me, Zelda, I want you to have no doubts, no fears. I want you to be absolutely certain, so I am not asking yet. I am just showing you a possibility, a future we could build together. She walked through the rooms, imagining them finished and furnished. A kitchen where she could cook, a sitting room for evening reading, bedrooms for children who might someday come. It was everything she had ever wanted and been afraid to hope for. It is beautiful, she said, and meant it. They stood on the unfinished porch, watching the sunset fade to twilight. Riley's arm was around her shoulders and Zelda leaned into his warmth. I am not afraid anymore, she said suddenly, realizing it was true. Or rather, I am afraid sometimes, but it does not control me anymore, because you are right. I am not alone. Riley kissed the top of her head. No, you are not, and you never will be again. Rachel's baby came on a cold November night. The birth was difficult, and Zelda worked alongside the midwife, helping however she could. Rachel's labor lasted 18 hours, and by the end, everyone was exhausted. But when Zelda finally placed a squalling baby girl in Rachel's arms, the joy on her friend's face made every moment worthwhile. They named her Sophia, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. Zelda spent the next weeks helping Rachel recover, managing the household and caring for the older children while their mother bonded with the new baby. Riley came by every day, as he always did, and one evening Zelda looked up from where she was rocking Sophia to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What?" she asked softly, careful not to wake the sleeping infant. "You look right, holding a baby," he said. "Like that is where you belong." Zelda felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she smiled. "I have always liked children. I hope to have several of my own someday." "Someday soon, maybe," Riley said, and the promise in his voice made her heart race. Christmas came, and with it a rare snow that dusted the desert white. The Reeves family celebrated together, the house full of warmth and laughter. Riley gave Zelda a beautiful shawl he had bought from a trader, soft wool and deep blue. She gave him a book of poetry she had found in Las Lunas' small general store, knowing he liked to read in the evenings, on Christmas night, after the children were asleep and the adults were sitting by the fire. Randall raised his glass. "To family," he said. "Both the family we are born into and the family we choose." His eyes fell on Zelda as he said it, and she felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had been accepted here, made part of something bigger than herself. It was a gift beyond price. January brought cold winds and quiet days. The ranch work slowed during winter, giving everyone time to rest and prepare for the busy spring ahead. Riley used the time to work on his house, and often Zelda would bundle up and walk over to help, holding boards while he nailed or helping to paint walls. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side. Riley taught her about ranching and horses, and she taught him about books and music. They were different in many ways but complementary, each bringing strengths the other lacked. One February afternoon, they were painting the bedroom that would someday be theirs. Zelda was on a ladder, reaching for a high corner, when she lost her balance. She gasped, tipping backward, but Riley was there instantly, his strong hands catching her waist and steadying the ladder. "Careful," he said, his voice tight with concern. Zelda climbed down, her legs shaking. "I am sorry. I thought I could reach it." Riley took the paintbrush from her hand and set it aside. Then he cupped her face in his paint-speckled hands. "Zelda Ainsworth," he said, "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You make me laugh, you make me think, and you make me want to be better than I am. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life catching you when you fall and celebrating with you when you fly." "Will you marry me?" For a moment, Zelda could not speak. Then she laughed, a joyful sound that filled the empty room. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Riley, I will marry you." He kissed her then, thorough and deep, and when they finally broke apart, both were smiling so widely it almost hurt. "I do not have a ring yet," Riley admitted. "I have been carrying that question around for weeks, but I planned to wait until I had a ring to make it proper." "I do not need a ring right now," Zelda assured him. "I just need you." They were married in late March, when the desert was blooming with wildflowers. It was a small ceremony at the Las Lunas church, with just family and close friends in attendance. Zelda wore a dress Rachel helped her sew, soft cream cotton with lace at the collar. Riley wore his best suit, and when she walked down the aisle to meet him, the look on his face told her everything she needed to know about how he saw her. Ruth Martinez cried happy tears. Randall and Rachel stood as witnesses, with the children fidgeting in their Sunday best. And when the priest asked if anyone objected to the union, there was only warm silence. "I do," Riley said when asked, his voice clear and certain. "I do," Zelda echoed, and felt the last of her fears fall away. They moved into the finished house the next week. Riley had completed the last details while Zelda prepared for the wedding, and it was perfect. Their bedroom had the painting they had done together, slightly uneven but full of memories. The kitchen had a big window overlooking the valley. The sitting room had a fireplace and shelves for books. It was home. Their first months of marriage were a time of discovery and adjustment. They learned each other's habits and quirks, the small rhythms of living together. Riley was neat but forgetful, often leaving his hat wherever he happened to set it down. Zelda was organized but sometimes too rigid in her routines. They learned to compromise, to communicate, to give each other grace, and they learned joy. The simple pleasure of waking up next to someone who loved you, of sharing meals and conversations and dreams, of being part of something larger than yourself. Zelda continued to help Rachel with the children several days a week, and she discovered she had a talent for teaching. Young Marcus especially responded to her patient instruction, and soon other ranch families were asking if she might tutor their children as well. By summer, Zelda had started a small school in Las Lunas, meeting 3 times a week in the church hall. She taught reading, writing, and arithmetic to children ranging from 6 to 14, and found the work deeply fulfilling. Riley encouraged her, proud of her ability to build something of her own. In August, a year after she had first arrived in Las Lunas, Zelda missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be certain, then told Riley one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Riley went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "How do you feel about that?" It was such a Riley question, asking about her feelings rather than simply assuming she would be happy. Zelda considered it carefully. "Frightened," she admitted. "Excited, hopeful, terrified I will fail as a mother the way I have failed at other things." Riley took her hand. "You have not failed at anything, Zelda. You have learned and grown and built a beautiful life from nothing. You are going to be an extraordinary mother." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I have watched you with Rachel's children, with your students, with every child who crosses your path. You are patient and kind, and you see them as people, not problems. That is all children really need." Zelda leaned her head on his shoulder. "Will you catch me if I fall?" "Always," he promised. "Always." Their son was born in late March, almost exactly a year after their wedding. The labor was hard but not dangerous, and when Zelda finally held the squalling infant, she felt a rush of love so fierce it frightened her. They named him Robert, after Riley's father. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair, and from the beginning he was curious and determined. Riley was a devoted father, walking the floor with Robert during colicky nights and changing nappies without complaint. Watching her husband with their son, Zelda felt something in her heart settle and heal. This was what family was supposed to be. Not obligation and desperation, but love and partnership and choosing each other every day. The years passed in the way of happy lives, marked not by drama but by small joys and steady growth. Robert grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved horses and books in equal measure. When he was 3, Zelda had another baby, a daughter they named Rose. 2 years later came another son, James. The house that Riley had built expanded to accommodate their growing family. He added another bedroom, then a larger kitchen. The valley filled with horses, Riley's breeding program becoming known throughout the territory. Zelda's school grew too, eventually moving to a dedicated building in town. They had struggles, of course. A drought one year that killed part of the herd. A bout of influenza that swept through the territory and left young James weak for months. The death of Ruth Martinez, who had been the first to welcome Zelda and had become a beloved grandmother figure to their children. But through it all, they had each other. When Zelda worried she was failing as a mother, Riley reminded her of their children's laughter and curiosity and kindness. When Riley doubted his abilities as a rancher during the drought, Zelda showed him the strong horses and loyal workers he had cultivated through years of fair dealing. They caught each other when they fell, again and again, just as Riley had promised in the beginning. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Riley took Zelda back to Las Lunas, to the spot where she had first stepped off the stagecoach. The town had grown in the past decade, new buildings replacing old ones, but the basic shape of it was the same. "You remember standing here?" Riley asked, his arm around her waist. "You were so scared, trying so hard to look brave." "I remember a cowboy who appeared exactly when I needed him," Zelda said, smiling up at her husband. "Though I did not know at the time that he would become my whole world." "I knew," Riley said. "The moment I saw you, something in me said her. I did not understand it then, but I knew you were going to be important." Zelda thought about the woman she had been, desperate and afraid, certain she was destined to fail. That woman would hardly recognize her life now. The home, the children, the work she loved, the man who loved her. "I am not afraid anymore," she said. "Not of failing, not of the future, because I know that whatever comes, we will face it together." Riley kissed her there on the dusty street, in front of God and the whole town, and Zelda kissed him back, full of gratitude and joy and a love that had been tested by time and found true. They returned home to find their children playing in the yard, watched over by Rachel's oldest daughter, who helped watch them sometimes. Robert was teaching Rose to braid a rope, while James toddled around collecting interesting rocks. The house Riley had built stood solid behind them, smoke curling from the chimney where dinner was cooking. This was success, Zelda thought. Not wealth or status or freedom from struggle, but this. A family built on love, a home filled with laughter, a partnership that made them both stronger. She had been so afraid of falling, of failing one more time. But Riley had caught her, just as he promised. And together, they had built something neither could have created alone. Years continued to unfold. Robert grew into a young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's love of learning. He went to university in Santa Fe, studying agriculture and animal husbandry, before returning to the ranch to work alongside Riley. Rose became a teacher like her mother, eventually taking over Zelda's school when Zelda decided to retire. James, the youngest, inherited his Uncle Randall's gift for business and helped expand the ranch's operations into new territories. Randall and Rachel's children grew as well, and the extended family remained close, gathering for holidays and celebrations, supporting each other through losses and changes. When Randall died of a heart condition at 60, it was Riley and Zelda who helped Rachel through her grief. Just as Rachel had helped them through difficult times, Riley's hair went gray, then white. Zelda's face developed lines around her eyes from years of smiling. Their hands, clasped together on evening walks, were marked with age spots and calluses from decades of work. But their love remained as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered so many seasons. On a warm evening in June, 30 years after Zelda had first arrived in Las Lunas, they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their children were grown and scattered, though they visited often. The house was quiet in a way it had not been for decades, filled only with the two of them and their memories. "Do you ever think about that day?" Zelda asked. "When you first saw me?" "All the time," Riley admitted. "I think about how close you came to marrying Howard Jenkins, how different your life would have been." "Our lives," Zelda corrected. "You would have been different too without me." Riley considered that. "Lonelier," he said finally. "Less full. You have made every day brighter, Zelda." "Every single one." She squeezed his hand. "You saved me, you know, not just from Howard Jenkins, but from myself, from my fear of trying again, of risking my heart. You taught me that falling was not the end of the world if someone was there to catch me." "We saved each other," Riley said. "I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to build something, to hope for something beyond just working the ranch and going to bed tired. You gave me love." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. Zelda thought about all the moments that had brought them here. The fear and the courage, the struggles and the triumphs, the ordinary days that had somehow added up to an extraordinary life. She thought about the mail-order bride who had stepped off a stagecoach with nothing but a carpet bag and a heart full of fear. That woman had been certain she was destined to fail, that she had used up all her chances at happiness. How wrong she had been. How beautifully, wonderfully wrong. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too," Riley replied. "Always have, always will." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Zelda rested her head on her husband's shoulder, surrounded by the life they had built together. The fear of failure that had once consumed her seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the certainty that came from 30 years of being loved and supported and caught every time she stumbled. She had been afraid of falling, but Riley had promised to catch her. And he had kept that promise every single day for 30 years. And she had caught him in return again and again, because that was what love was. Not the absence of falling, but the presence of someone who would always be there to help you back up. Their story, which had begun with desperation and fear, had become something beautiful. A testament to the power of choosing each other every day through every season. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is try again, even when you are terrified of failing. And as night fell over the New Mexico desert, Zelda Reeves closed her eyes and smiled, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy that had brought her to this place. Home, not just in location but in the truest sense. Home in Riley's arms, home in the life they had created, home in a love that had proven stronger than any fear. The end of their story was not dramatic or earth-shattering. It was simply this: two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had chosen love over fear, and who had built a life that mattered. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs, earned through hard work and sustained by devotion. Robert came to visit the following week, bringing his wife and their 2 children. The house filled with noise and laughter again, and Zelda watched Riley teaching his grandson to rope the way he had once taught Robert. The cycle continuing, love passing from generation to generation. Rose arrived the next day with her husband and their daughter, and James came from Santa Fe with his new bride. For a weekend, the house was as full as it had been in the early years, bursting with family and stories and the comfortable chaos of people who loved each other. On Sunday evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Zelda found Riley in his study, looking at an old photograph. It was from their wedding day, both of them young and hopeful, standing in front of the church. "We were so young," Riley said, showing her the picture. "We were," Zelda agreed. "And so sure we knew what we were getting into," Riley laughed. Did we know anything at all? We knew we loved each other, Zelda said. That was enough. They went to bed early, tired from the busy weekend but content. As Zelda settled against Riley's side, his arm coming around her in the familiar way it had for 30 years, she thought about all the nights they had shared. Thousands of them now, each one a choice to love, to stay, to build this life together. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For catching me, for keeping your promise, for loving me even when I was too afraid to love myself." Riley kissed her forehead. "Thank you for trusting me enough to fall." They drifted off to sleep, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, not perfection but partnership. Not the absence of fear but the presence of courage. Not a life without falling but the certainty of being caught. And in the morning, when they woke to another day, another chance to love and laugh and live, they rose together, ready to face whatever came. Because they had learned, over 30 years and countless moments of grace, that life was not about avoiding failure. It was about having someone who would help you up when you fell, who would remind you of your strength when you forgot, who would love you through every season and every struggle. Zelda had been afraid of failing, but Riley had promised to catch her always. And he had kept that promise, transforming her fear into faith and her doubt into devotion. Together, they had built not just a home or a family, but a love that would endure long after they were gone, living on in the children they had raised and the life they had created. It was enough. It was everything. It was a love story written not in grand gestures but in daily choices, and it was beautiful precisely because it was real. Two imperfect people who had chosen each other, who had worked at love every single day, and who had discovered that the falling was not the point. The catching was. The getting back up together was. The choosing each other again and again and again. That was the story of Zelda and Riley Reeves. Not perfect but true. Not without struggle but full of love. Not the fairy tale she had once imagined but something better, real, hard-won, and lasting. A testament to the power of promises kept and fears conquered, and two hearts that beat as one. The years ahead would bring more joys and more sorrows. They would lose Rachel, eventually, and some of the old ranch hands who had become like family. They would celebrate grandchildren's weddings and mourn friends who passed. They would face the changes that came with age, the slowing down and the letting go, but through it all, they would have each other. Riley would catch Zelda when her knees grew weak, and she would catch him when his memory began to fail. They would sit on their porch and watch sunsets, holding hands and remembering all the moments that had brought them here. And when, many years later, Riley passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, Zelda held his hand and whispered her thanks for a life well lived and a love well earned. She mourned him deeply, but she did not regret a single day. How could she, when he had given her everything she had ever needed? Zelda lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them touched by the love she and Riley had built. And when her time came, she went peacefully, a smile on her face, ready to reunite with the cowboy who had caught her when she fell and had never let her go. Their house still stands, lived in now by Robert's son, filled with another generation of love and laughter. The ranch prospers still, built on the foundation Riley laid and expanded by children who learned from his example. And in Las Lunas, in the small cemetery behind the church where they were married, 2 headstones stand side by side. Riley Xavier Reeves, beloved husband, father, and friend Zelda Ainsworth Reeves, beloved wife, mother, and teacher, and beneath both names, the same inscription: "I will catch you always." It was a promise kept, a love fulfilled, and a story that would be told for generations. The mail-order bride who had been afraid of failing and the cowboy who had promised to catch her, building a love that transformed fear into faith and turned two lonely hearts into one unbreakable bond. Their story was complete, their lives well lived, their love eternal. And that, in the end, was the greatest success of all. Not the absence of failure, but the presence of love. Not a life without falling, but the certainty of being caught. Always.